The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council sat at the heart of Station Prime, a massive structure that floated in neutral space between 7 different star systems. Representatives from 47 different species gathered here to discuss matters that affected the entire galaxy. Today they talked about Earth. 200 years had passed since humans made their first contact with the galaxy. The meeting had been short and tense. The Council offered humanity a place among them, but with many rules and restrictions. The humans would have to follow laws they had no part in making. They would have to open their borders to alien inspection. They would have to limit their military and share their technology. The human delegates had listened politely. Then they refused. They went back to their solar system and closed their borders. For 2 centuries, Earth stayed silent. No trade ships left. No diplomats visited other worlds. The Sol system became a mystery, a closed box that nobody could see inside. The galaxy mostly forgot about humanity. Some species remembered them as the proud primitives who thought they were too good for the Council. Others saw them as a cautionary tale about isolation. But most species never thought about Earth at all. The Zephrani Empire did not forget. The Zephrani were warriors who controlled a quarter of the galaxy. Their military was the strongest in known space. They believed in strength above all else, and they saw Earth's isolation as weakness. For years, the Empire had watched the Sol system, waiting for the right moment. That moment came when the Galactic Council voted to claim all isolated systems for the common good. The vote passed. Legally, the Empire could now enter human space without breaking any galactic laws. Admiral Krellix received his orders with satisfaction. He would take the Third Armada into the Sol system and bring humanity into the Empire by force. The Third Armada was magnificent. 500 warships of various sizes, from small destroyers to massive dreadnoughts. Each ship carried advanced weapons and shields. The crews were experienced veterans who had conquered dozens of worlds. Admiral Krellix stood on the bridge of his flagship and felt confident. This would be an easy victory. His intelligence officer was less certain. Marcus Chen was human, one of the few who had left Earth decades ago. He had defected to the Empire and now served as an expert on his own species. Marcus stood at his station, reviewing the data on Earth's defenses, and his face showed worry. "Admiral," Marcus said carefully, "I recommend caution. We have very little recent intelligence from Earth. Our information is 200 years old." Krellix waved a clawed hand dismissively. "We have enough. They have orbital defense platforms. A small fleet of maybe 30 destroyers. Nothing that can challenge us." "What are you worried about, Chen?" Marcus hesitated. "There are stories from Earth, old stories. Before I left, there were rumors about a secret project. They called it the Revenant. A ship built in secret somewhere in the outer system. Nobody I knew ever saw it, but people talked about it. They said humanity was building something that would make the galaxy regret rejecting us." The Admiral laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Ghost stories. Myths to make primitive humans feel better about their isolation. If such a ship existed, our intelligence would have detected it. We have the best sensors in the galaxy." "Perhaps," Marcus said quietly, but he did not look convinced. The Armada prepared for the jump into human space. Engineers checked the weapons systems. Pilots ran through their attack protocols. Medical teams prepared for casualties, though they expected few. The entire fleet hummed with readiness. They had conquered worlds before. This would be no different. Admiral Krellix recorded his message to Earth. It was standard procedure. He informed the humans that their system now belonged to the Zephrani Empire. He gave them 24 hours to surrender peacefully. If they refused, the Armada would take the system by force. The Admiral kept his message short and professional. He saw no need for threats. The size of his fleet was threat enough. The jump into Sol system went smoothly. 500 ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. They appeared at the edge of the system, well beyond the orbit of Pluto. Their sensors immediately began scanning for threats. What they found confused them. The defense platforms were there, orbiting Earth as expected. But they were offline, powered down. No energy signatures. No active weapons. The small fleet of destroyers that intelligence had predicted was nowhere to be seen. The entire system appeared empty except for the orbital platforms and the civilian traffic around Earth itself. "Where are their ships?" one of the tactical officers asked. Admiral Krellix studied the sensor data. Hiding, perhaps. Or maybe they never had much of a fleet at all. Increased sensor range. Find me their warships. The Armada moved deeper into the system, advancing slowly and carefully. They broadcast the Admiral's message toward Earth. Then they waited for a response. None came. Earth remained silent. No transmissions. No communications. No sign of surrender or defiance. Just silence. The blue and white marble of Earth hung in the distance, peaceful and beautiful. Its moon orbited serenely nearby. Everything looked normal. Everything looked safe. But Marcus felt his stomach twist with worry. This was wrong. Humans should be screaming defiance or begging for mercy. This silence meant something. It meant preparation. "Admiral," the sensor officer called out suddenly. "I'm detecting something. Large energy signature. Very large. It's coming from behind the moon, on the far side from our position." Krelix leaned forward in his command chair. "Show me." The main display changed, showing the dark side of Earth's moon. At first, nothing was visible. Then something moved. It was huge, bigger than any ship in the Zafrani fleet. As it emerged from behind the moon, the bridge crew fell silent. What they saw defied understanding. The ship was black. Not the gray or dark blue of most military vessels, but pure black, like it had been cut from a piece of space itself. It absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The hull was covered in markings, symbols, and writing from human cultures across their history. Ancient runes, modern script, mathematical formulas, and artistic designs covered every surface. The ship was massive. It dwarfed even the largest Zafrani dreadnoughts. Its shape was unusual, angular and aggressive, like a blade designed to cut through space. Weapon ports lined its hull in numbers that seemed impossible. The energy signature it gave off was stronger than an entire battle group. Marcus stared at the screen and his voice came out as barely a whisper. The Revenant. It was real. They actually built it. The black ship did not transmit any messages. It did not hail the Armada or issue warnings. It simply moved, accelerating toward the Zafrani fleet with impossible speed. On the Armada's sensors, the ship's weapons began to power up, one after another like stars being born in the darkness. Admiral Krelix felt the first touch of fear. "Battle stations," he ordered. "All ships combat formation. Prepare to engage." But as the Revenant drew closer, moving faster than any ship that size should be able to move, Marcus knew that battle stations would not be enough. Nothing would be enough. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had spent 200 years in silence. They had not been hiding. They had been building. Building a monster. Building a myth turned into terrible reality. The beast was awake, and it was coming for them. Admiral Krelix ordered the Vanguard forward. 50 of his best cruisers broke formation and accelerated toward the unknown human vessel. The Admiral watched from his flagship as the cruisers took up attack positions. Each ship was a proven warrior, equipped with shields that could withstand planetary bombardment and weapons that could crack moons. 50 such ships should be more than enough to handle one enemy vessel, no matter how large. "Target the enemy ship," the Vanguard commander transmitted. "All batteries, prepare to fire on my mark." The Revenant continued its approach. It did not slow down. It did not change course. It simply came on, black and terrible against the stars. When it reached weapons range, something strange happened. The ship seemed to shimmer and hundreds of small objects detached from its hull. They spread out like a swarm of insects, each one moving independently. "What are those?" the Vanguard commander demanded. "Fighters? Missiles? Neither. They were drones, but not like any drones the Zafrani had seen before. Each one was small, fast, and carried a powerful explosive charge. More importantly, they were smart. They communicated with each other, learning and adapting as they flew. When the Vanguard opened fire, the drones scattered, moving in patterns that made them nearly impossible to hit. Then the Revenant fired its own weapons. The first shots were not energy beams or missiles. They were solid metal spears launched at incredible speed. The Zafrani called them kinetic weapons, ancient and primitive technology that most species had abandoned long ago. But these were not primitive. They moved so fast that shields could not stop them. They punched through energy barriers as if they did not exist, tearing into hull metal with devastating force. One cruiser took a direct hit to its engine section. The kinetic spear went completely through the ship, coming out the other side and continuing into space. The cruiser's engines exploded, sending the ship spinning out of control. Crew members died instantly as sections of the ship lost pressure. The drones reached the Vanguard ships. They did not attack randomly. They targeted specific systems with precision that spoke of advanced intelligence. Communication arrays went first, cutting the cruisers off from each other. Then weapons systems, then engines. Each drone seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum damage. The Revenant fired again. This time it used electromagnetic pulse weapons. Waves of energy washed over the Vanguard, and electronics began to fail. Ships that had been fighting suddenly went dark as their systems crashed. Emergency power came on in some vessels, but many were completely disabled, floating helpless in space. "Fall back," the Vanguard commander screamed into his radio. "All ships retreat to the main fleet." But only half his ships could still receive the message. The others were already dead or dying, their crews struggling to survive as life support failed. Admiral Krelix watched in horror from his command chair. 3 hours. That was all the time it took for the Revenant to reduce 50 warships to scrap metal. The human ship had barely taken any damage itself. A few dents where Zephrani weapons had connected, nothing more. What terrified the Admiral most was not the power of the weapons. It was the way the Revenant fought. There was a pattern to it. A brutal efficiency that spoke of centuries of warfare compressed into one vessel. The ship did not just destroy its enemies, it dismantled them systematically, cutting away their ability to fight back before finishing them off. Marcus stood at his station, his face pale. He had tried to warn them. Earth's history was full of war. Thousands of years of humans fighting humans, developing new and terrible ways to kill each other. Swords, arrows, guns, bombs, nuclear weapons. Every advancement in human technology had been applied to warfare. And now, after 200 years of silence, all of that knowledge had been poured into one ship. "Sir," Marcus said quietly, "I recommend we withdraw. Immediately." Krelix turned to glare at him. "Withdraw? We still have 450 ships. One vessel, no matter how powerful, cannot defeat an entire armada." "That ship is not just powerful," Marcus replied. "It is learning. Did you see how the drones adapted? They analyzed our defenses and found weaknesses in real time. Every ship they destroy gives them more data. The longer we fight, the better they get at killing us." The Admiral stood from his chair, his pride wounded and his anger rising. He had conquered 17 star systems for the Empire. He would not run from one human ship, no matter how intimidating it appeared. He would crush it with numbers and firepower. "All ships advance," he ordered. "Combat Formation Alpha. Concentrate all fire on that vessel. I want every weapon we have hitting it at once. Overwhelming force. That is how we will win." The Armada surged forward, 450 warships moving in coordinated patterns. They formed a massive sphere around the Revenant, attacking from all sides at once. Energy beams, missiles, and kinetic rounds filled space. It was the most concentrated firepower the Admiral had ever deployed. Nothing could survive such an assault, but the Revenant was already moving. As the Armada closed in, the human ship began to change. Sections of its hull separated, breaking apart into smaller pieces. For a moment, the Zephrani thought they had damaged it. Then they realized the truth. The ship was not breaking. It was transforming. The Revenant was not one ship. It was dozens of smaller vessels that could combine or separate as needed. They had been fighting a single massive warship. Now they faced a fleet of smaller, faster vessels, each one still larger and more powerful than anything the Zephrani had. The separated sections moved with incredible speed, weaving through the Armada's formation. They were everywhere at once, impossible to pin down. One section would draw fire while others struck from unexpected angles. They communicated perfectly with each other, fighting as one unit despite being physically separate. The human vessels employed weapons the Zephrani had never encountered. Gravity wells that crushed ships from the inside, magnetic fields that tore vessels apart at the molecular level, focused microwave beams that cooked crews alive inside their own armor. Each weapon was different, each one a nightmare from human imagination. But the worst weapon was psychological. The Revenant broadcast across all frequencies. The Zephrani heard sounds from Earth's history, war drums from ancient times, battle hymns from forgotten armies, the sounds of human conflict across the centuries, all playing at once in a terrible chorus. And over it all, a single message repeated in perfect Zephrani language. "You were warned. You came anyway. Now you understand?" Marcus closed his eyes, listening to the sounds of his people's history. He recognized some of the war songs. His grandmother had taught him one when he was a child. Hearing it now, Used as a weapon against an invading army, he felt something twist inside him. Guilt, maybe, or pride. He was not sure which. The battle became chaos. The Zephrani could not adapt to an enemy that changed tactics every few minutes. Just when they developed a defense against one weapon system, the Revenant would switch to something completely different. The human ship fought like water, flowing around obstacles, finding weaknesses, exploiting every gap in the Armada's defenses. Admiral Krelix watched his fleet die. Ships exploded or went dark. Escape pods launched in desperate attempts to save crews. The casualty numbers climbed higher and higher. 200 ships lost. 300. The Admiral's pride crumbled, replaced by something he had rarely felt in his long military career. Fear. He grabbed his communications officer. Order a ramming attack. Any ship that can still move full speed at the enemy. We will destroy them with our own hulls if we must. It was an act of desperation, and everyone on the bridge knew it. But some captains obeyed. 20 ships turned and accelerated directly at the Revenant's separated sections. They pushed their engines to maximum, determined to ram the human vessels even if it meant their own destruction. Some succeeded. 3 Zephrani ships managed to collide with parts of the Revenant. The impacts were catastrophic. Both the ramming ships and parts of the human vessel were destroyed in massive explosions. For the first time, the Revenant took serious damage. Sections of it broke apart. Debris scattered into space. The great black ship bled. A cheer went up on the flagship's bridge. "We heard it!" someone shouted. "It can be damaged." But Marcus did not cheer. He watched the sensors carefully. The damaged sections of the Revenant were already moving, reconnecting with undamaged parts. The ship was repairing itself, reforming into new configurations, and its weapons fire had not slowed down at all. If anything, it seemed to be fighting with increased intensity, as if the damage had made it angry. The truth settled over the bridge like a cold blanket. They could hurt the Revenant, but they could not stop it. The ship adapted too quickly, learned too fast, fought too efficiently. It was everything humans had learned about warfare over thousands of years, all combined into one terrible machine. Admiral Krelix stared at the tactical display. 200 ships. He had only 200 ships left out of 500. Half his armada was gone, and the Revenant was still fighting, still killing, still winning. For the first time in his career, the Admiral considered retreat. Then the sensors detected something new. Multiple energy signatures appearing from behind Jupiter. The readings showed warships, dozens of them, accelerating toward the battle. The human fleet emerged from Jupiter's gravity well like sharks scenting blood in water. They were smaller than the Revenant, sleek vessels that moved with deadly grace. Each ship was shaped differently, designed for specific roles. There were carriers that launched fighter swarms, heavy cruisers bristling with weapons, and stealth ships that appeared and disappeared from sensors like ghosts. Marcus counted them on his display. 73 ships. Not a large fleet by galactic standards, but each one moved with purpose and precision. They formed up around the Revenant like wolves running with a bear. The message was clear. The Great Black Ship had not been humanity's only defense. It had been their announcement. Their way of saying, "This is what happens when you threaten us." Admiral Krelix felt his confidence shatter completely. He had been outmaneuvered from the very beginning. The intelligence reports had been wrong. The Revenant had not been humanity's desperate last defense. It had been bait, drawing the Armada in while the real fleet waited in ambush. Everything, from the silent orbital platforms to the empty system, had been carefully planned. "We have been played for fools," the Admiral said quietly. His bridge crew looked at him, waiting for orders. What could they do? Retreat was the only logical option, but the Admiral's pride fought against it. To run would mean admitting defeat. It would mean the end of his career, possibly his life, when he returned to face the Emperor. Then something unexpected happened. The human fleet stopped attacking. They held their positions, weapons powered and ready, but not firing. The Revenant also ceased its assault, its separated sections reforming into the single massive vessel again. The sudden silence was almost as terrifying as the battle had been. A transmission came through on all frequencies, not from the Revenant, but from Earth itself. The main screen showed an elderly woman sitting in what appeared to be a government office. She looked tired, her face marked with deep lines and gray hair pulled back simply. but her eyes were sharp and clear as she gazed out at the Armada. "I am Director Sarah Chen, Chair of Earth's Defense Council," the woman said. Her voice was steady and calm. "200 years ago, we came to the galaxy asking to join you as equals. You saw us as primitives barely worth acknowledging. You offered us membership, but only if we followed your rules, opened our borders to your inspection, and limited our ability to defend ourselves. We refused. We came home, and we asked ourselves one question." She leaned forward slightly. "How do we ensure humanity's survival in a galaxy that does not want us?" The answer was simple. We would become something you would never dare to threaten. We took every lesson from our history, every advancement in warfare, every tactical innovation from thousands of years of human conflict, and we poured it all into one project. The Revenant is not just a warship. It is our promise to the galaxy. Hurt us and we hurt you worse. Much worse. Marcus stared at the screen. Director Chen, he knew that name. She had been a junior diplomat during First Contact, one of the humans who had argued for joining the Council. Now, 2 centuries later, she was still serving Earth, but her message had changed completely. She was not asking for acceptance anymore. She was demanding respect through force. "You came to conquer us," Director Chen continued. "You brought 500 warships to force us into your empire. We have shown you what happens when you threaten Earth, but we are not monsters. We do not want to kill any more of your people. So I offer you terms. Leave. Take your surviving ships and return home. Carry this message to your Emperor and to the Galactic Council." She stood from her chair. "Humanity claims the Sol system and a 50-light-year buffer zone around it. This space is ours. Any violation of this boundary will be considered an act of war. And if you force us to war, the Revenant will come to your worlds. It will visit your home planets. It will show your people what we showed you here today. This is not a threat. It is a fact. We do not want to fight you, but we will never be your victims." The transmission ended. The screen went dark. On the bridge of the flagship, nobody spoke. Admiral Krellick sat in his command chair, his mind racing. 200 ships left. 200 out of 500. 60% casualties. The worst defeat the Zafrani Empire had suffered in 3 generations. And the humans were offering to let him leave with even those survivors. "Admiral," Marcus said softly, "I recommend you accept their terms. Immediately." "Accept?" The Admiral's voice was bitter.
"I would be admitting defeat."
"The Emperor will execute me for this failure. You will definitely die if you continue fighting," Marcus replied. "The humans have shown mercy. In my experience, they rarely show it twice. Take the offer. Return home. At least you will be alive to face the Emperor's judgment." The Admiral closed his eyes. Everything he had built, his reputation as a conqueror, his status within the Empire, all of it was gone. But Marcus was right. If he continued fighting, the entire Armada would die here. At least this way, some would survive to tell the tale. Maybe that was worth more than his pride. "Prepare to withdraw," he said finally. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. "All ships, power down weapons," and an alarm screamed across the bridge. Sensors showed missile launches. Multiple missiles, fusion warheads coming from one of the Armada's cruisers. They were not aimed at the Revenant or the human fleet. They were targeted at Earth itself, at the civilian population centers. "Who authorized that launch?" The Admiral roared. "Identify that ship." The communications officer checked his systems, his face pale. "Captain Vexillar, sir. The cruiser Judgment. He is broadcasting that he will not surrender to primitives. He says if the Empire cannot have Earth, nobody will." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. A zealot. Of course, there would be at least one zealot in a fleet this size. Someone whose pride would not allow surrender. Someone who would rather commit genocide than accept defeat. He watched the missiles streak toward Earth, and for a moment he felt a strange emotion. Not fear for the humans who were about to die, but anger. Anger at Vexillar for throwing away the mercy that humanity had offered. The Revenant moved faster than physics should allow. It accelerated from a standing position to incredible speed in seconds, putting itself between Earth and the incoming missiles. The great black ship spread itself wide, making its hull as large a target as possible. The fusion warheads impacted directly against its armor. The explosions were massive, each one bright enough to light up the entire solar system for a moment. The Revenant disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire. For several seconds, nobody could see anything. The sensors were overwhelmed by the radiation and heat. The human fleet held position, not moving, waiting to see if their greatest weapon had survived. When the fireballs cleared, the Revenant still floated in space. Its black hull was scarred and burned. Sections of armor had been blown away, revealing the structure underneath. Fires burned on its surface, quickly extinguished by damaged control systems. The ship was wounded, truly wounded for the first time. But it was still operational, still fighting, still protecting Earth. A new transmission came from the Revenant. Not words this time, just sound. Laughter. Cold, human laughter that echoed across every frequency. It was not the laughter of amusement. It was the laughter of someone who had been pushed too far. Someone who had shown mercy and had that mercy thrown back in their face. Then came a message, spoken in a voice that seemed to come from the ship itself. You just made it personal. The Revenant began to move again. But this time it was different. Before, the ship had been fighting the entire Armada, spreading its attention across hundreds of targets. Now it focused on just one, the cruiser Judgment. Captain Vexeler's ship. The human fleet held position. This was not their kill. This was personal for the Revenant. The other Zafrani ships backed away, giving the great black warship room. They had seen what it could do. None of them wanted to be anywhere near it when it was truly angry. Captain Vexelar tried to run. His cruiser turned and burned its engines at maximum power, trying to escape, but the Revenant was faster. It caught the Judgment within minutes, matching its speed and course. Then it began its work. The Revenant did not destroy the cruiser quickly. It could have. One shot would have been enough. Instead, it disabled the ship piece by piece. Engines first, cutting off any chance of escape. Then weapons, leaving the Judgment helpless. Then communications, isolating it from any help. The Revenant was systematic, methodical, taking its time. It wanted the captain and crew to know exactly what was happening to them. Marcus watched from the flagship, unable to look away. The other bridge officers were silent, horrified by what they were seeing. The Revenant was not just defeating an enemy. It was making an example, showing the entire Armada what happened when you attacked civilians, when you rejected mercy. Finally, the Revenant grabbed the disabled cruiser with magnetic grapples and began dragging it back toward the rest of the Armada. The great ship moved slowly now, deliberately, making sure everyone watched. It brought the Judgment to a stop in clear view of the flagship, displaying it like a trophy. Another transmission came from the Revenant. This time it showed a courtroom. Not a military court-martial, but a proper civilian court with judges, lawyers, and evidence presented carefully. The withdrawal took 3 days. The surviving Zafrani ships gathered their dead, collected their wounded, and prepared for the long journey home. The human fleet watched but did not interfere. The Revenant floated at the edge of the system, its damaged sections slowly repairing themselves. A silent guardian making sure the Armada actually left. Admiral Krellick spent those 3 days in his quarters, composing the report he would have to deliver to the Emperor. How could he explain what had happened? That 500 warships had been defeated by a single enemy vessel and a small support fleet? That the primitive humans had outsmarted and outfought the greatest military power in the galaxy? Every word he wrote sounded like excuses. But they were not excuses. They were simply the truth. Marcus visited him on the second day. The human defector had not slept well since the battle. He kept thinking about Director Chen's face during her transmission. She had looked tired, yes, but also satisfied, like someone who had completed a very long and difficult task. 200 years Earth had spent preparing for this moment. 2 centuries of isolation, building and planning, all for this single demonstration of power. I should have listened to you, the Admiral said when Marcus entered. You warned me about the Revenant. About human history. I dismissed you as paranoid. That mistake cost 300 ships and thousands of lives. You could not have known, Marcus replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Nobody could have predicted that ship. But sir, I came to tell you something important. I am staying here. The Admiral looked up sharply. Staying? In human space? You are defecting back to your own people? Yes, I left Earth 50 years ago because I wanted to see the galaxy. I thought humanity was being foolish, refusing to join the Council. I thought we were isolating ourselves out of pride. But I was wrong. My people were not being proud. They were being careful. They understood something I did not. The galaxy sees kindness as weakness. They only respect strength. Marcus walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. I have one last service to perform for you, Admiral. I will write a report about Earth, about human culture and history, everything I know. You should give it to the Emperor and the Galactic Council. Tell them that humans do not want to conquer anyone. They just want to be left alone. If the galaxy can accept that, there will be peace. If not, he gestured toward where the Revenant floated in the distance. Well, you have seen what happens if not. Admiral Krellix nodded slowly. I will deliver your report, and I will recommend that the Empire recognize human sovereignty over their claimed space. The Emperor may not listen. He does not like to be told what he cannot have. But he is not a fool. When he sees the footage of this battle, when he understands what that ship can do, perhaps he will make the wise choice. I hope so, Marcus said. For everyone's sake, I hope so. On the third day, the Armada prepared to jump out of the system. 200 ships, less than half of what had arrived. Each one carried survivors and stories that would spread across the galaxy. Stories of the Revenant, the ship that appeared from myth to become a terrible reality. Before they left, Director Chen transmitted one final message. This one was for Marcus Chen specifically. The old woman appeared on a private channel, and for the first time she smiled. Welcome home, Marcus, she said. Your grandmother spoke of you often before she passed. She hoped you would return someday. I am glad you chose to come back. We need people who understand both humanity and the galaxy. You can help us navigate the future that is coming. Marcus felt tears on his face. He had not cried in decades. Thank you, Director. I will do my best to serve Earth, I promise. I know you will. Now come home. We have much work to do. The transmission ended. Marcus transferred to a human shuttle that came to collect him. As he flew toward Earth, he looked back at the departing Zafrani fleet. He felt no guilt about leaving them. He had given them good service for many years. But now it was time to return to his people, to help them deal with the galaxy that would soon come knocking at their door. The Armada jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Sol system behind. The journey home would take weeks. Plenty of time for the crews to think about what they had witnessed. Plenty of time for the stories to grow and change. By the time they reached Zafrani space, the Revenant would already be a legend. Admiral Krellix delivered his report to the Emperor in person. He expected punishment, possibly execution. Instead, the Emperor watched the battle footage in silence, his expression unreadable. When the recording finished, showing the Revenant dragging the Judgment through space like a predator carrying prey, the Emperor spoke. 60% casualties, the Emperor said flatly, against one ship and a small fleet. This is unacceptable, Admiral, but it is also instructive. These humans have done in 2 centuries what most species take millennia to achieve. They have made themselves too dangerous to attack. It is actually quite impressive. The Admiral kept his voice steady. What are your orders, Majesty? Shall we prepare a larger force to return to human space? No, the Emperor said firmly. We will recognize their claimed territory as sovereign space. A 50-light-year buffer zone is reasonable. We will inform the Galactic Council of this decision. Let them decide how they wish to deal with humanity. The Empire has learned its lesson. Relief flooded through Krellix. He would not die for this failure. The Emperor understood that some battles could not be won, no matter how many ships you brought. Some enemies were simply too prepared, too determined, too dangerous to fight. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from all 47 member species gathered to watch the footage from the Battle of Sol. The images spoke for themselves. The Revenant tearing through an armada, the human fleet appearing from ambush. The trial of Captain Vexlar conducted with perfect adherence to galactic law. Arguments erupted immediately. Some species wanted to organize a coalition to bring humanity back under control. Others pointed out that such an attempt would likely end the same way the Zafrani invasion had ended, only with higher casualties. A few representatives quietly suggested that maybe humanity had the right idea. Maybe strength was the only language the galaxy truly understood. The debate went on for days. Finally, a compromise emerged. The Council would officially recognize human sovereignty over the Sol system and the surrounding 50-light-year zone. In exchange, humanity would agree not to expand beyond that boundary without Council approval. Trade and diplomatic relations would be permitted, but on human terms, not Council terms. It was not the relationship the Council had wanted 200 years ago, but it was the relationship humanity had forced them to accept. The vote passed with a narrow majority. Earth would remain independent. and the Revenant would remain a warning to anyone who thought about changing that arrangement. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The footage was copied and shared, analyzed and discussed. Military academies studied the tactics the Revenant had employed. Engineers tried to understand its technology. Philosophers debated the ethics of building such a weapon. Everyone had an opinion about humanity and their monster ship. Some species saw the Revenant as a threat that needed to be eliminated before it could threaten their own worlds. But most saw it for what it truly was, a deterrent, a promise that attacking Earth would cost more than any potential gain was worth. The humans had not built the Revenant to conquer. They had built it to be left alone. In the Sol system, life began to return to normal. The orbital platforms powered back up. Trade ships started arriving from species willing to deal with humanity on equal terms. Earth opened embassies and began the slow process of building relationships with the galaxy, but on their own terms this time. Director Chen retired shortly after the battle. She had spent most of her life preparing for this moment, building the defenses and strategies that saved Earth. Now she could rest, knowing that her work had succeeded. Humanity was safe, not because they had joined the galactic community, but because they had made themselves too dangerous to threaten. Marcus Chen took a position in the new Human Diplomatic Corps. He traveled to various species' homeworlds explaining human culture and helping to build bridges between Earth and the rest of the galaxy. He told anyone who would listen that humans did not want war. They wanted peace, but they would defend themselves with absolute determination if pushed. Most species listened. Some did not. Those who did not found their own plans to test humanity quietly shelved when they calculated the potential cost. The footage of the Revenant in action was very persuasive. No prize was worth facing that ship in battle, and the Revenant itself? After the battle, it returned to the dark side of Luna, the same place it had emerged from. The great black ship powered down its weapons and entered a state of hibernation. Its systems hummed quietly, maintaining readiness but not actively operating. It was sleeping now, but it could wake at any moment. Every species in the galaxy knew it was there. Every military planner included it in their calculations when considering any action near human space. The Revenant had become more than a ship. It had become a symbol, a reminder that humanity, once dismissed as primitive and isolated, had become one of the most formidable species in the galaxy. 20 years passed after the Battle of Sol, 20 years of peace between humanity and the galaxy. It was not a perfect peace, and it was not always easy, but it was peace nonetheless. Trade flourished. Cultural exchanges happened. Some humans ventured out into galactic space while some aliens visited Earth with permission. The 50-light-year buffer zone remained respected by all species. The Revenant remained on the dark side of Luna, sleeping but never forgotten. Its presence shaped galactic politics in ways both obvious and subtle. When disputes arose involving human interests, they were settled through negotiation rather than force. Nobody wanted to be responsible for waking the beast. Children on Earth grew up hearing stories about the great ship. Some of the stories were true. Many were exaggerated. Parents told their children how the Revenant had saved humanity from conquest, how it had faced 500 enemy ships and won, how it had shown the galaxy that humans could not be pushed around. The truth, as always, was more complicated than the stories. The Revenant had won through superior technology and tactics, yes, but it had also won because the humans had been willing to do something most species were not. They had poured every resource they had into a single weapon system for 200 years. They had sacrificed colonies in exploration and cultural development, all to build their guardian. Marcus Chen, now old and gray himself, sometimes wondered if it had been worth the cost. Earth had been isolated for 2 centuries, while the rest of humanity's potential remained locked in the Sol system. What might humans have achieved if they had joined the galaxy peacefully? What art, science, and culture had been lost in the name of security? But then he would remember the footage of the Armada entering their system with the intent to conquer. He would remember the sight of 500 warships ready to take away human freedom, and he would know that Director Chen and all the others who built the Revenant had made the right choice. Freedom had to be protected, sometimes with weapons, sometimes with deterrence, sometimes with the willingness to become a monster so that monsters would leave you alone. The Galactic Council slowly accepted humanity's place in the cosmic order. They were not members of the Council, but they were recognized as a sovereign power with rights and territories. Some council members pushed for humanity to join officially, arguing that having such a powerful species outside the organization was dangerous. But humanity continued to refuse. They had learned their lesson. Membership meant giving up control, and humans would never do that again. In the military academies of a dozen species, the Battle of Sol became required study. Tactical instructors analyzed every move the Revenant had made. They studied how the human ship had targeted command vessels first, disrupting enemy coordination, how it had used psychological warfare alongside physical weapons, how it had adapted to changing battlefield conditions in real time. The most important lesson, the one every instructor emphasized, was this: never underestimate an enemy. The Zafrani had dismissed humanity as primitives with limited technology. They had paid for that mistake with 300 ships and thousands of lives. Arrogance was the greatest weakness a warrior could have. The humans had taught the galaxy that lesson in the most brutal way possible. Some species tried to build their own versions of the Revenant. They wanted a super weapon that could provide the same deterrent effect. Most of these projects failed. A few succeeded in building powerful ships, but none captured the essence of what made the Revenant special. It was not just a weapon, it was a statement. A promise, a line drawn in space that said this far and no farther. The human economy grew strong as trade routes opened up. Earth's unique resources and technologies found markets across the galaxy. Human art and music became fashionable in some circles. Human literature was translated into dozens of alien languages. Slowly, carefully, humanity began to take its place among the stars, but always on their own terms. There were incidents, of course. Pirates who did not respect human territory, corporate interests that tried to establish illegal operations in the buffer zone. Each time, human defense forces responded quickly and firmly. The Revenant never needed to wake. The smaller human fleet was sufficient to handle these minor threats. But everyone knew the great ship was there, waiting in the darkness. Just in case, Admiral Krellix lived out his remaining years in quiet retirement. The Emperor had not punished him for the failed invasion. Instead, he had given the Admiral a position as an advisor on human affairs. Krellix wrote extensively about the Battle of Sol, trying to help his people understand the mindset of humans. He wanted to make sure the Empire never made the mistake of underestimating them again. In his writings, the old Admiral emphasized one point over and over. Humans were not naturally violent or warlike. They could be peaceful and cooperative, but they would defend themselves with absolute determination when threatened. They had a saying on Earth: speak softly and carry a big stick. The Revenant was the biggest stick anyone in the galaxy had ever seen. The years turned into decades. New generations grew up who had not lived through the Battle of Sol. For them, the Revenant was just a part of the landscape, like the moon itself. They knew it was there. They knew what it represented. But they did not feel the same fear that older generations did. To them, it was simply normal that humanity had such a powerful defender. This worried some of the older humans. They remembered the cost of building the Revenant. They remembered the 2 centuries of isolation and preparation. They worried that younger generations would become complacent, forgetting that peace had to be actively maintained. That freedom was never truly secure, but perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. That children could grow up taking their safety for granted, that they could look at the stars and see opportunity instead of threats, that they could dream of exploration and discovery rather than conquest and survival. The Revenant had bought humanity something precious, the luxury of hope. On Luna, in a facility hidden from most eyes, a small crew maintained the Revenant. They kept its systems ready. They ran diagnostics and made repairs. They trained on simulators, practicing the tactics and strategies that had won the Battle of Sol. Just in case. Always just in case. The captain of the Revenant's crew was a woman named Sarah Okafor. Her grandmother had served on the ship during the battle, and she had grown up hearing first-hand accounts of that terrible day. She understood the weight of responsibility that came with commanding such a weapon. It was not glory. It was burden. The burden of being ready to kill thousands, maybe millions, to protect billions. Captain Okafor prayed every night that she would never have to give the order to wake the Revenant fully. She prayed that deterrence would be enough, that the galaxy would remember the lesson learned 20 years ago, that the beast would remain in its sleep, a nightmare that never needed to become real again. Her prayers were answered. Year after year, the Revenant remained dormant. Its presence alone was sufficient to maintain peace. The ship had become something more than steel and weapons. It had become a symbol understood across civilized space. It represented humanity's determination, their refusal to be victims, their willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect their freedom. Philosophers debated the ethics of the Revenant for generations. Was it right to build such a weapon? Was deterrence through threat of overwhelming violence ethical? Did the ends justify the means? There were no easy answers, but most agreed on one thing. Given the choice between conquest and freedom, humanity had chosen freedom. And they had made that choice stick. The galaxy moved on. New crises emerged and were resolved. Alliances shifted. Technologies advanced. But through all the changes, one constant remained. The Sol system and its 50-light-year buffer zone were sovereign human territory. Inviolate. Protected by the sleeping beast that had once shattered an armada. In the end, the Revenant's greatest victory was not the battle it had won. It was all the battles it prevented through its mere existence. Every conflict that was resolved peacefully because nobody wanted to face that ship. Every threat that was never made because the potential cost was too high. Every human life that was saved because a potential enemy decided to negotiate instead of attack. The myth had turned into a beast. The beast had shattered an armada, and then the beast had become something even more powerful. A guardian that protected through fear, through reputation, through the memory of what it had done and the promise of what it could do again. On the dark side of Luna, sensors continued their endless sweep of space. Weapons remained charged to minimal power, ready to activate fully at a moment's notice. Repair systems kept the hull maintained. The Revenant slept, but it did not dream. It simply waited, watching, ready, and it remembered. It remembered the battle. It remembered the ships it had destroyed and the ships it had spared. It remembered Captain Vexillar's missiles streaking toward Earth. It remembered putting itself between those weapons and the planet it was built to protect. It remembered everything, because that was what the Revenant was designed to do. Not just to fight, not just to kill, but to remember, to serve as living history, a monument to the day humanity declared to the galaxy, "We will not be conquered."